All right then. So, first thing we need to understand is that changing city names, street names, defacing statues, that's pretty much commonplace throughout history. I'm reading this book here. It's called The Rise and Fall of Stalin. And I decided to read this because I've always believed there are a lot of parallels between what we are going through right now as a society and what was going on in Russia in the early 1900s that led to the Russian Revolution and Stalin coming to power. A lot of similarities. And this book here has been extremely informative. Unfortunately, I'll probably have to burn it sooner or later for some reason. So I don't, it's kind of, Stalin was a madman. We can have this conversation, but it's funny how when he came to power, he started changing the names of a lot of these cities that were within Russia. So there was a city in 1914 called Petrograd, right? The Russian Revolution happened in 1917, and then in 1924, in honor of Lenin, Stalin renamed Petrograd Leningrad, and then they changed Leningrad to St. Petersburg in 1991. He did this for all sorts of cities and statues and whatever. He was just defacing history, rearranging history to best fit his mold. Stalingrad, right? Stalingrad was called Stalingrad in 1925. It used to be called Tsaritsyn, but Stalin wanted to rename it after himself. Actually, there's a really funny story in here that if you might want to hear. So this is an account from an American sort of journalist diplomat that had went over to Russia and was talking to Stalin. So he still liked to change the names on maps. This account here is in the 50s, 1950s. He still liked to change the names on maps. Gilles is the name of the journalist or diplomat that had went over there, tells a story that when he went to dinner that night in Stalin's villa, he came upon a vast map of the world in the entrance hall. Stalingrad was encircled in blue pencil. The city of Konigsberg was about to be renamed Kaliningrad, and Stalin pretended to search for it on the map. Then, observing that there were still some towns near Leningrad, Peterhof, Ornabaum, and others, which still bore the German names given to them at the time of Catherine the Great, he said curtly, "Change the names. It is senseless that these places still bear German names." Zhendov, who was present, immediately took out his small notebook and recorded Stalin's orders with a little pencil. So that's the story of Stalin in a nutshell. I don't like it, change it. I don't like it, change it, for whatever reasons. And in this case, a lot of these cities in Russia still had German-oriented names, so he decided to change it. So this stuff happens, and I know it's very easy for us to just get really enraged anytime something like this comes up because of the quality of person who's suggesting these solutions. These are very, very much of these people are the same people who are advocating a complete lockdown of our economy, and then they went out there and protested in the thousands. I don't have a lot of respect for that, because what the hell do we do if we get a second wave? So it's like, me as a Canadian, I've always viewed Canada as being a great peacekeeper and sort of like a shepherd of the moral conscience of the planet. And when we did the lockdown, and we just never really considered any other solution other than what America was doing, what China was doing, what Great Britain was doing. I mean, it's symptomatic of our leadership, right? So it was no surprise to me. However, I hold Canada to a higher standard, and we should be debating these types of things. And if you've been following the political specter of this whole thing, first of all, you'd be grossly offended that these politicians get paid over $100,000. Many of them, if not all of them, have no spine. But, we would debate a lot of these subjects, right? And it would be tabled in the form of a logical, civil debate, as we always do. It's not the name of the game anymore. Well, Trudeau thought it was pertinent to shut down Parliament all the way till September. And just before that, all of the MPs voted to give themselves a raise. I didn't hear a lot of people talking about that at all. And I thought that was abhorrent. While the rest of us got laid off and furloughed from our jobs, these politicians give themselves a raise and then give themselves a summer vacation. And you can say what you want, but it was a slap in the face to the country when Trudeau went out there in this protest with thousands of people around in the middle of a pandemic, while his message the entire time has been social distancing, stay inside. I followed the rules, man, as a good Canadian would. I followed the rules. And it was so disrespectful for him to do that. And people just gave him a pass because he was going out there pretending that he gave a crap about social justice, when he was the guy that was wearing blackface back in the day. No one's going to call him a racist, but I might get called a racist. Blackface. Who the hell does that? Right? So anyways, be that as it may, these types of things come up, and it's obvious that leadership and our sort of media is not willing to have conversations about these subjects. So it's important for us to do our own research. So I went into this Henry Dundas situation. He was a Scotsman. I read his profile. There's a couple of different websites that have his profile. The complete rundown, which is dry AF, is on historyofparliament.org. And you get his whole story. And let me tell you, this guy was a great politician. There's no two ways about it. Many politicians of that time heralded this man as a man of great integrity and wasn't scared to speak his mind. And, he was a stalwart of, Scotland. They nicknamed him the King of Scotland. I didn't go in deep into Henry Dundas. I really just wanted to focus in on, him being against slavery. And it's true. So from historyparliamentonline.org, the account is right here. On April 2nd, 1792, Dundas made himself the champion of gradual abolition of the slave trade and carried his case against the immediate abolitionists by 193 votes to 125. On April 23rd, he submitted resolutions fixing 1800 as the date for final abolition. Pitt, who essentially was the head chief at the time, William Pitt, did not agree, and Dundas surrendered to the majority, who preferred a terminal date of 1796. So, they wanted to abolish slavery by 1796. And Pitt wanted to abolish slavery at 1800. He wanted a slow process. They wanted it done right then and there. All right. Okay. So he was against slavery then, right? Then you just sort of get into this sort of web of sort of the chain reaction of slavery being abolished all over the world. And guess what? Ontario, Upper Canada at the first, known at the time, it was Upper Canada, for you millennials that aren't aware. Upper Canada was the first British colony to abolish slavery in 1793 with a law called an Act to Prevent the Further Introduction of Slaves and to Limit the Term of Contracts for Servitude within this province. John Simcoe was the Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, Ontario. This man, as a Christian, hated slavery. And he brought that over here. And he said, no way are we having slaves over here. So that's what we did here in Ontario. We set the tone for the world. So what happened over in England was they didn't get around to enacting the Slave Trade Act, which is what it's called, basically an act for the abolition of the slave trade, till 1807. So everything that the big conversation was going on about in 1790, wait a minute. I got all these dates written down here. So in 1792 is when Dundas had opposed slavery or abolishing slavery. 1792. He wanted it banned in 1780 or 1800. And then they came to an agreement at 1796. And then they never got it done until 1807. So what the hell does it even matter? Like, essentially Dundas was defeated, right? And essentially people who were wanting to abolish the slave trade didn't get it done till 1807. So the whole conversation leading up till 1796 or 1800, in my opinion, is erroneous. Like, all of them could be racist. Even the guys that voted in favor of making it illegal in 1796. Listen, when you start throwing 1790 and 1800 at me, like, I get all this stuff mixed up. So here's my points. That Canada is a great country. And right now, the people who are facilitating the conversation and our leaders all should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. However, nobody has any shame anymore. So that doesn't even matter. But when people sit here and start tearing down Canada like it's America, you are just lazy. And you are not Canadian in my mind. Because there are ways to do things around here that don't involve tearing things down, that don't involve protesting during the middle of a pandemic. It's called common decency. And that's what we had here in Canada. And we can get to the bottom of these things by having a conversation. But it starts with getting rid of all of our members of parliament. All of them. I'm with you on that. Because there is no leadership. There's no one willing to just have a spine and stick up for themselves because they're acting in their own self-interest. I want to ask them all, are you working for Canada or are you working for yourself? Because this is not Canadian. If we did not have Henry Dundas's name up on that street, then I would not be motivated to do research about the man and learn that Ontario was the first British colony to abolish slavery. And we have people going around like this place is no different than the States. And what kills me is that we take all of the solutions, these crap solutions from America. Ban the police. Ban the police. Listen, have you heard of the Murray Hill riot? Have you heard of the Murray Hill riot in 1969? That happened in Montreal. These people don't read history. Do you know what happened in the Murray Hill riot? The police had organized a strike for 16 hours, which resulted in complete anarchy in Montreal. The army had to be brought in. People died. Cars were bombed because the police weren't getting paid enough, so they walked off the job. And then the mayor at the time, the next day, pleaded for them to come back. So, abolish the police. Like, come on. Like, do you want to be taken seriously or not? Like, maybe the police are getting overpaid right now. But if we weren't going through this pandemic, and if we weren't going through, the civil rights issue, we would be talking about how much violence there is in Toronto. Right? Gun violence all across GTA. It's been happening a lot. And the police actually need to do a better job. So if we're going to say defund the police, and the reason why is because you're not doing a good enough job, and this is why, then let's have that conversation. And let's hear what they have to say. And then we'll come back and you have this conversation. But when you put the conversation in the hands of children who went to university and got a degree, which amounts to nothing because they have no logic and they don't care as far as I'm concerned. They don't care about Canada. They don't care about the way that they come across to the rest of us, the silent majority. They're just here to destroy and replace it with nothing. And this is when you hear this conversation about abolish the police. Well, what's after that? Oh, well, we're gonna have social workers, and they're gonna come to certain. Okay, so you're gonna have social. Okay, so all right, so let's work this out. So let's figure out how this happens. Fine, but if you're gonna start taking away police, and then you're gonna start taking away guns. If you don't have police, how the hell am I going to defend myself? What is going to stop someone just walking? And people seem to think that this couldn't happen in Canada or something. But we're going down this path here where our leaders are absent and they have no spine, and irrational anarchists have hijacked the social justice movement, just like they do with everything, and are now committed to tearing down our system. And probably most of them are communists. I don't know what's going on here, but the media is not reporting on any of this, like, fairly. And the people on Instagram with their stupid little memes, like, you guys are a joke. A joke. You have no credibility. No one's listening to you. We're all leaving. We're either blocking you or getting off the platform because you're the same people that were criticizing people for protesting, for wanting to go back to work. And then a couple weeks later, you go out on a protest. So I'm open for having this conversation about civil rights, and of course, but we all need to have a little spine here and just call people out. Canada deserves better than this. Your grandparents deserve better than this. My grandparents deserve better than this. The people who created this country deserve better than this. And our leadership needs to go. We need to call an election, and we need to replace them with people that can have conversations and come to solutions that satisfy both sides. Because defunding the police and renaming and defacing statues, it's not how we do things here in Canada, and it's a dangerous precedent. Because believe you me, the same thing happened in Russia in 1936, 1937. Something called the Great Chistka. Chistka in Russian means purge. Essentially, the kulaks, which were the upper class Russians at the time, farmers, were branded as having privilege, entitlement, and essentially Stalin needed to remove them in order to collectivize resources so he could establish a price for goods. That's how a communist system works. Everybody contribute your goods and I'll dictate the price. Well, guess what? We don't ever hear about this in the history books. But this same path that we're going down right now, except it's different, of course, but this same path resulted in 8 to 26 million kulak Ukrainian people dying. 37, 38. Look it up. Horrific. So I just want to say, if you're out there posting memes and you're out there accusing people of being racist without giving them a fair trial, you want them to lose their job, you come out with all this venom. You either... Actually, here's a story. I'll tell you the story. The Moscow trials. The Moscow trials took place in Russia, 1934 to 1938, in that area. And essentially, Stalin had killed everybody, as I was saying, in the Chistka. And he had no enemies. So he started turning on his own conglomerate. All of the many great generals from the 1917 revolution who were allies with Stalin and Lenin were put on trial for crimes they did not commit. Stalin actually went to the bother of writing out accusations, writing out a fictional plot that these men would have to confess to in front of the entire country. A show trial. This trial was called the Trial of 16. So the Moscow trials was 3 trials, but the Trial of 16, a lot of great generals, evil men, but great Russian generals at that time. A lot of great literates. Is that the right word? And Stalin's closest political confidants. So could you imagine just, having all of our political leaders put on a show trial where the stakes were death? So Stalin writes out these fictional stories, and he tortures these men for months until they say the story verbatim. Only 3 men out of all 3 trials had denied the allegations. Majority of them were reduced to shells of their former selves. They got up, sacrificed their pride, dignity, everything. They had enough. They're completely depleted. So they get up and they read word for word what Stalin lies. They said lies. They didn't believe in them, but they were saying them so that Stalin would maybe give them mercy. So they gave in. They told the lie. They were convicted of treason and being Trotskyists, sentenced to death. You're in a courtroom, sentenced to death. You go out stage left, down a hall, into the basement, 2 rooms down there, go in there, bullet to the head. That quickly. So here's the point. You post your memes right now, but it will not save you. This virus, this movement, this witch hunt, there's no stopping it. There's no satisfying it. If you do not get in front of this right now and take it seriously and not be scared. I get it. You could potentially lose your job now, but listen, there's big things at stake here. If you let these people destroy our system and I don't know what could happen. It's crazy, but everything's on the table now. But the point is that you can virtue signal all you want. But if we've learned anything from history, is that the mob spares no one. Read your history, people. This is what will give you the power to come up with some opinions about these things. At least read it before they burn it all, because that's what's going on right now. Been saying this for years. Well, anyways, a long rant, but I gave you a lot there. A lot to think about, and it's been a long time for me. I don't know if any of this, what I just said there, makes me a racist. I don't think it does. But who knows? There's so many people out there that just want to find people like me and crush me. That's just the way it is now, man. It's a witch hunt. So we have to formulate a resistance in some way, an intellectual resistance. It's tough because this ideology is right down in the ranks. University, college, high school, it starts from there. So I don't know, guys. I don't know. But we're going to have to basically come up with solutions. And we need better leadership. Less, yes. And that's all I got to say about that for now. If you have any questions, just inbox me. Ciao.